All right, folks. Guten Morgen, Ohayou gozaimasu, Sasanghao. Good morning. Welcome to our session on Atelier for server-side development. Before I really get into the presentation, quick show of hands. How many of you before Global Summit had ever worked with Atelier or Eclipse? Oh, wow, good number. How many have attended a session here on Atelier? And pretty much almost everybody. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to talk very briefly why we did this. Another why we'll click into there. We're going to talk a little bit about some basics. Now, since most of you seem to have worked with it before, I'm going to go with that pretty quick. But it bears repeating some of the basics of working with Eclipse. Then we're going to jump right into a demo. And we're going to do typical server-side development, create a class, do some debugging, show you how to navigate around and take advantage of how things have been implemented in the Atelier system. Then we'll talk about what's to come, which is constantly changing, and take some questions. So let's jump right in. First thing is, what's with the name? Yeah, everybody knows tech companies name things weird ways, and it turns out this one makes a lot of sense. It's an English word that means workshop or studio. Hey, actually makes sense. But why would we do this? For a long time, we've got a studio environment. It works. It's a little different, but it's functional. Why would we want to create a new one? For a long time, there's been that desire to have something that was platform independent. Many developers now work on Macs or even Linux and other environments. So there's been that need to do something else and not have to create a virtual environment or something running Windows just so I could run Studio. That was annoying. Notice I've said annoying and nice to have a couple of times. Fast forward to today, and you deal with this thing called source code control. That's not a nice to have anymore. You have to have source code control for many of the modern development methodologies. It's just basically a requirement. And we all know that plugging in source code control into Studio is not for the faint of heart. You can do it, and I have clients that are very, very successful at it, but it's a lot of work. So why do we do it? Those two main goals. So we looked around, tried to figure out what we're going to do, and came across Eclipse. A lot of people were using it. It's a good environment. It has easy access to source control. That was the main goal right there, is easy access. There's pretty much a plug-in for every single source code control system that's out there. It took me minutes to integrate my GitHub account into Atelier. And most of that was finding and downloading the eGit plugin. So it's extremely easy. It's platform independent. So right there, we've hit our two major goals. The environment, beyond just those goals, the benefits that we can see, the environment is going to be familiar to many more developers. So you have somebody coming into the InterSystems technology that's new to it. The problem with somebody coming into a new environment is not the language. Some may argue with me on that, but it's not the programming language. Most people know 2 or 3 languages just to do their day-to-day work. It's not the data environment, because again, most people today, you have to know at least a couple of different data environments just to get your job done. It's the way you work with those environments. So if somebody comes in, they come into Atelier. If they've worked with Eclipse, they're going to be familiar with how to work with Atelier. Nice and smooth. You have access to a lot more things. So if you work in multiple languages, instead of having Studio open here and another system open over there, one environment, you can have plugins for a lot of different languages. And there's a whole ecosystem of other things, as you'll see later on in the presentation, that you can take advantage of. And one of my personal favorites, when they designed this, hats off to the developers, some of whom are in the room, you can work across multiple namespaces and multiple instances in a single environment. Whereas in Studio, you had to try and make multiple copies work together, which was always fun, or you had to close out of one namespace and go into another. Very irritating. So now I can work across multiple environments, all in the same IDE. So working with Atelier, which is working with Eclipse. Some basic concepts. Most of you may already be familiar with. We're going to go through it really quick. The first thing you run into is a workspace. What is a workspace? It defines a directory, an environment where you store all locally defined related projects, the default location for those. It also keeps track of configuration and Eclipse settings for the particular way you're working with Eclipse or Atelier right now. You can have multiple workspaces. Next thing you run into is a thing called a perspective. Perspective is basically just a view. It's a grouping and arrangement of windows to perform a particular function. So within Atelier, we have a few basic perspectives that we come with. And again, it's Eclipse. There's lots of plugins to do other things. But we have the Atelier perspective, which is where we'll spend most of our time today. And we have the debug perspective for actually debugging code. And finally, I listed the eGit perspective. If you're using Git, you're going to have a perspective for working with your repository and committing code and doing all that stuff. And lastly, we have the concept of a project. Project is really important because all your work in Atelier is done locally. So if you're working on a class, until you commit it to the server to compile it or sync it, it's existing only on your local environment or in your source code control repository. It's not on the server yet. So it has to have some place to put it. That's what the project is. The project defines that location. Typically, it's going to be for your local projects. It's going to be underneath your workspace, but it could be anywhere. So that's required. And one important limitation is a project would be connected to a single instance and a single namespace. So if you have projects or initiatives that cross multiple namespaces, multiple instances, you'll have multiple projects. But don't worry, you can associate the two together so you can keep that organizational structure and keep everything tied together. So that's the basics. I went through it really quick. We'll take questions at the end if you have any. That's the basics of working with Atelier and Eclipse. Now let's get our hands on. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. First thing I'm going to do is open up Atelier. And you all have that on your start menu, right? So first thing you do is select your workspace. It's a nice little window here that tells you not only the last one you're in, all your recent ones, or most of your recent ones that you've worked with. So if you're working in multiple workspaces, you can actually easily cross between them. You can also browse for the particular directory where it's something that's not listed here, or create a new one if you're creating a new project. But we got what we want, so we're just going to launch. And this just takes a moment with Eclipse, because it's loading in all those lovely plugins. So now we have our environment. Before we actually do anything, let's just walk through what you're seeing here very quickly. First off, perspectives. We've got the workspace. Now let's talk about perspectives. Perspectives are typically available to you in this quick access menu up in the, by default, I keep saying default because you can change everything in the upper right-hand corner. So you can see we're in the Atelier perspective. We also have our debug perspective and my Git perspective, which we will not spend much time in today, and even my Java perspective. So again, I can work across multiple languages here. If I have PHP code or something else, one environment. I'm working across everything. I don't have to be switching around all over the place. If you don't have a perspective there in this quick access menu, you can click on this button and you can pull up anything that's already installed. Or if you don't see it here, you go to the Eclipse Marketplace, you go to the Eclipse repositories, and you find the perspective you want, and you download it. Perspectives are customizable too. So if you want to rearrange your windows, add in new features or functions, and then save them, you can do that also. You'll see a little bit of that as we get into the presentation. So that's perspectives. Now let's talk about the actual Atelier perspective in particular. So there are, over here on the left-hand side, there are three basic explorers that we're going to work with. The first one is connect up to an instance of our products. So I already have several that are installed here, but we need to create a new one. So I'm going to open that up. I'm going to give it a name, Summit 17. And I have to tell it where it is, and I have to tell the port to connect, which I just happen to remember. And you give it your credentials to get in. You'll notice you can use SSL. Actually, always test your connections to make sure it's okay, and then go in. Now, with the server-side Explorer, you can look at everything that is on the server. So if I open up my Summit 17, I can see all my namespaces. We're going to do our work in Ents demo. This happens to be an ensemble instance of our products. I can open up my classes, and I can see all the packages that are out there. I can open up a demo, and I'm doing this for a particular reason because I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to find a particular class, and I'm going to open that class up. So what I've done now is I've gone to the server. I've pulled a server copy down. But remember, you cannot edit anything that's not local. So this is all grayed out. I'm just looking at it. I can't do anything else but look at it in this view. If I actually want to modify something, I have to have a project. So we go to the Project Explorer, which is conveniently right now empty. So if I hit right-click on this and go to New, you can see I have an option here to create a new Atelier project. There are many types of projects depending upon what you have installed, such as a Java project or a PHP project, which you could access from this button, but we're going to go right into an Atelier project. Remember, you have to have that project to do any work. And I'm going to call this GS code. I'm going to tell it to use the default location. Again, this is my local location, my local repository. This is not source code controlled yet. I pick the server, which is going to be Summit 17. That's the connection. Now, one point I need to make really clear here. It's really, really great that I can have multiple connections, multiple projects, multiple workspaces, all out there. And I can cross and mix and match things to my heart's content. With, what is that quote from Spider-Man? With great responsibility or power comes great responsibility. Make sure you name things intelligently. Otherwise, you're going to spend half your day trying to find the last thing you worked on. So I try to name things intelligently for my Summit presentation. So I'm going to connect to the Summit 17 server, and I'm going to go to the Ents demo namespace, and I'm going to finish, and now I have a project. Conveniently empty, but I do have a project. If I want this project to actually be part of my source code control, I right-clicked here, and I will go down to Team, and I will go to Share this project, and I'm going to share it with my GitHub repository, which is right out here. You'll notice that down here it's going to tell you that it's going to copy things around. That's what this whole thing is about. It actually moves your code out of your local repository, if there was anything there, and puts it into your GitHub repository or your Team Foundation server or Subversion or whatever your other system is. And I'm going to finish that. That's pretty much all we're going to talk about for source code control. There was a whole nother session on that. You will notice that it tells you that I am in my repository for Global Summit 2017. I'm in the main branch. So all that came out of the source code control, and that's how I know that I'm in source code control. Now, one thing you'll notice you don't see here. Somebody look at that screen and tell me what namespace and what instance I'm in. Can't tell anymore. Turns out there's not a real easy way to tell from here. Enter the Atelier Explorer. This is kind of a mash together of both a project view and a server view. So it is project-centric, so I've got my projects listed down here, but when I open that up, I can now see that I've got a connection, Server 17, and the namespace that I'm connected to. So that's the easy way to look at it. And now I can explore that just like I would go through the Server Explorer. I can open this up, and I can look at all my server-side classes, and in fact, this view shows you everything that is visible to the namespace, not just created in the namespace. So you see everything. And I'm not going to go into there, but there's nothing locally done yet. So that's where we're going to go, and we're going to say, right-click here, again, go to New, and you have all the things that you can create over here. We're going to start with a class file. You will notice that the explorers look a little bit different. Whenever we create something in Atelier, with only a couple of exceptions that you'll discover later, we want to do it the Eclipse way. We want things to be done in a way that's going to be comfortable to people coming from an Eclipse environment, from outside of InterSystems, coming into this environment. So we've opened up a dialog because I'm in an Ensemble or Health Connect enabled namespace. I have options for creating operations or services, but I'm just going to create an empty class, just a regular old class. Because I was already in my project, it already pre-filled that in. I'll give it a package like we would always do. So pretty much this is all the same that you've done before in Studio. Same options that you are used to in Studio, except it's all here in one view. I can select a persistent or a registered or serial class, and then I can go to more if I want to have any other inheritance. So I can come over here and I can say, well, I'm also going to make this be an ends.request, and you'll see it's filtering things down and getting me to where I want to be. But if I've already used it, it remembers the last several that I've used. So I can just go here. I do want to have XML adapter, and I also want to have populate, and I'm doing the control click like you can do in many other windows, selecting multiple items and clicking OK. So now I have all my inheritance, I have everything I want. I can just click finish. And I have my class. Some things you want to be aware of when you're working in this. Any classes, including data types that you reference here, you can always hover over them. So if I hover over persistence, it's going to give me an abbreviated version of the documentation. So instead of having to go and get out of this and go to the class reference, I can quickly get to something here, and if I click F2, I can now open this window up more and scroll through it. It's not exactly like class reference, but it's an abbreviated version. It gives you some quick access to all that documentation. If I actually wanted to open that class up, I could do that also. Difference between this and Studio. In Studio, I could hover over it and right-click and open the declaration. In this, I have to actually have the cursor where I want to be, and then I can right-click and open the declaration. And we go into that. So it's an important difference in how that behaves. So now we have a new class, and we've gone through the wizards and we've created this. Let's go ahead and start creating some properties in this. This is where things become a bit different for you. In Eclipse, to get to what they call autocomplete, what we used to call IntelliSense, you do control space. In only very limited cases will it come up for you automatically, almost never. You're going to want to do control space to get into that. So I'm going to type in PR, control space, and I got my list of things that match PR. And I want to go to property. Now, why is this a good thing? Look at what it gives you. It gives you a template, not just an autocomplete, but an actual template of what you can do to finish this thing off, including documentation. So I can say, this is the first name, and you tab between these editable boxes. So I'm going to tab it to there, and I'm going to call it first name. And the type is going to be %st, control space. I get my list of, oops, I typed that wrong, didn't I? TR, there we go. Sorry, I don't have my reading glasses on, folks, so it gets a little rough here. Now, I can keep tabbing around here if I wanted to change things, but I'm all done, so I'm going to hit escape. And now I'm out of that edit mode, and I'll hit enter, and I'm going to go to the next one, property, and we'll just quickly create a couple here. Control space, last, name, tab. And you can see it actually gives you quite a bit of help here in getting that done and getting things done quickly. And I'll just add one more just to complete the picture. And I'm going to add in date of birth. And that's a percent date, and now I'm done. But it's not just properties and classes that are covered here. All the keywords of the class are covered here. So I can do control space right now, and I can see all the things that are available to me, including a class method template. This is where it gets really fun. So again, it wants to guide us through. Create your documentation. Documentation is important. So I'm going to do calculate my age. Notice I didn't say act my age. I'm going to say my age is the method name. I think I've got that right. You know what, folks? I am going to throw these on really quick. It's going to walk me through creating my arguments. So I am going to put in a birthday as percent DAT and select date. I'm also going to create an output, STAT as percent STAT. And again, because you'll notice it matched, only one thing could match, so when I hit Control Space, it just completed it for me. Now, typically when you do a class method and you're going to return a type, you're going to go into your class and the very first thing you're going to do is going to dim that so that you have autocomplete on that return type, and you're going to put that return type variable at the end of your method. Well, when I start typing the type of here, which is going to be integer, notice what it's doing. It's auto-completing not just where I'm at, it's also auto-completing the dim. And I can go in, return is going to be age. And again, it did both. So now I can escape out of that, and I'm done. But there's more. It's like, I'm selling Ginzu here. I can go try-catch blocks, because I'm a big fan of using try-catch, and it gives me a code block for try-catch. And I actually forgot to do one thing for you, so let me go back and do this. %dim. Exception, and it's a system exception. And now I can come down here, and I can override this to go EX. And not only did it remember all of my variables, the class types, and everything else I've been doing, it remembered the things I've dimmed, so it's going to auto-complete my except. And we'll just go in here and just do set STAT equal to, and again, I can do EX dot as, and notice, very similar in a lot of ways to IntelliSense, but in a lot of ways very much better. It's really working very well with across everything that we've defined. But there's more. This all works on the concept of templates. You can create your own templates. One of the problems I had in my first dry run is I kept going too long, and somebody says, you're doing a lot of typing. Do you have to do so much typing? Well, for this stuff I wanted to, because I wanted to show you all that autocomplete stuff. But the next few lines of code are pretty much, who cares? Well, I put it into a code template. AG, and I bring up my age calculation. Hit enter, and it's in. One thing to keep in mind, if you create your own templates, which you do under Windows, you go to Preferences, you go to Atelier, and you go to Templates, and they're all here. You can create your own, including creating your own editable blocks. There's a syntax for that that is easily understood, and there's examples pretty much of everything in here that you can look at. But once you create your own template, you have to close Atelier and open it up again for it to be active, or if you make a change to it, for it to be active. And that's just because of the way it builds the indexes of the things that it's going to autocomplete for you. Now we'll cancel out of that. You can also autocomplete on macros. We didn't really show that, so I'll do a set st, again, remember it's stat, equal to $, oops, I didn't mean to hit that. Okay. Even with my glasses on, I'm not seeing things. There we go. Helps if you type the right characters, guys. I can go down. I could have filtered it down, but I want to preset this to OK, so you have all of your macros that are out there. So keywords, properties, class methods, indexes, those are all there. Macros, class types, all these things have autocompletes on them. Variables that are defined and known to the environment. I've dimmed it. I have it on a parameter list. Those are all known to the autocomplete and are available to you. So now we have a class, and I'm going to save it. Now this is a configuration you can change. Ordinarily, by default, if I hit save, it's going to save it, send it to the server, compile it. I don't like that. I turn that off. You can do that in preferences. So I just saved it, and where does it exist right now? It only exists here in my local repository. Remember, nothing happens on the server until you sync it or compile it. It doesn't get saved to the server. You'll also notice, look up here in this corner. There's this little yellow triangle. It's telling us there's a problem. Something's not quite right here, and it doesn't know what it is. How do you know what that is? You can't hover over it, doesn't tell you. This is an Eclipse thing, doesn't want to tell anything about it. You have to go to Problems, and it turns out there's a Problems view. By default, typically you'll have it right here in your Atelier perspective. If you don't, you can go to Windows, you can go to Show View, and you can find either in this list or in other, you can find your Problems view. You can open it up, and then it tells you, oh, I have one warning that's saying, oh, you're out of sync with your namespace. Kind of expected that since I just created it and never saved it. So now, how do I move around in my class? That's the next thing you're going to want to do. How do I move around in my development? And before I actually save this up to the server and compile it, let's talk a little bit about that. You have a couple of views that you can look at. The biggest one, and this is one of my favorites, is the outline. From this, I'm in my class, I can navigate to anything I want. So if I go here, and actually I'm going to do something here just so you have a view, so you can see it knows I'm in my age. I can just click on it, and I go to first name, I click on it, I go to last name. It's kind of like that drop-down list that's at the top of Studio that nobody seems to know about. But it's right there and easily visible to you. The other thing I really like about Eclipse, this is the fun one. Why do you move around in your code typically when you're in the middle of development? You're trying to find out about something you did before. So you're going to go up, you're going to go away from your editing, you're going to scroll back up or move around and try and find what you want. Now you want to get back to where you're editing. Control Q. And you're right back at the last place you edited. One thing to be aware, that's a short-lived memory. So if you've compiled it or if you've done something else, if you've switched into other perspectives, it may forget your last edit point. But typically what you're doing is, oh man, I forgot what that thing was, or I remember I did this at the last method, so I'm going to scroll back up. Now how do I get back down to where I want to? Control Q, bang, you're right back where you were. You can also get to this outline view in a couple of other ways. If I'm in the class, I can do Control O. Again, I get my outline. The really neat thing with this view is if you look at that little tiny print down at the bottom, it tells you, hit Control O again, and I can see all the things that were inherited. And if I want to go to one of those, I can double click on it, and it opens up the class from the server and takes you to where that thing was. Again, really neat little features there. I can even see the outline from my Atelier Explorer. One of the reasons I love that view. That's where I do most of my work, is in the Atelier Explorer. And I can go down and I can see my person class and I can see all my stuff here. The only exception is because of the nature of this view, you have to double click to get to that point. Horrible, I know. So that's navigating around. One thing that we haven't done yet is actually commit it and compile it. So I'm going to do that now. The command, if you didn't allow your save to do this, Alt-C, I've modified it, yes I know, save it. And it's going to save it to the server, so now it exists on my server and it's going to compile it. But what would have happened if somebody else was also modifying this at the same time I am? Which can happen, you're working locally. Forgive me, I am going to go back to Studio here for just a second, and I'm going to open up my class here, and I'm going to do just a quick little edit to it. And I'm just not going to do anything but that. And let's compile that, and then we will, that's the last time you will see Studio. So now I've made a change. Now remember, Studio doesn't know anything about my local repositories. It's working only on the server. But I have my local code here that I'm working on. So now, let's go and do PR, and I'm going to pull up a property, and I'm going to just call it email. Really doesn't matter what I call it. And I'm done. So now I want to save this. Commit it to the server. I'm going to Alt-C. Do I want to save it? Yes. And it's going to come up with this. It's going to tell me, oh, somebody made a change that you weren't aware of on the server, and things don't match now. Keep in mind, this is not a merge. This is just a conflict resolution screen. It's telling you that somebody did something that you weren't aware of. Now you have a choice to make. What am I going to do about this? I can cancel out, and I can go and pull up the server version, because I can have both versions open and manually do my changes and merge what I need to merge from the server into my local copy. I can save the server copy only, so, oh, yeah, somebody already did what I was working on, I'm going to throw away my work, or I can save the local copy. If you're using source code control, that's where your merging would happen. This is not a merge at all. It's just telling you, hey, there's some problem here. You need to do something about that. I'm going to save my local copy. So now we're back to where we want to be. The class has been saved. It's been compiled. Everybody's back and happy again. So what we've done so far is we've created a new class. We've shown you all the ability to autocomplete, all those neat little features, how to navigate around your class and move around in your different things. What about taking something that exists and bringing that in? So let's go back to this thing I opened up, and I very intentionally picked an ensemble component here. I want this to be part of my project. I actually want to be able to edit this now. There's two ways to do that. If I already have it open, I can right-click here and pull up my menu and say, copy the project. And it's going to say, what project do you want? And I'm going to click next, and then it's going to give you a list of everything it's going to do. If you had been doing this the other way from Server Explorer and right-clicked on an entire package, you could have a whole list of things here. And you may not want all of them. So you can unselect things that you don't want. And I'm going to click Finish. And now if you look at my project, I now have a demo package. I have a sub-package, and I have that class, which is a BPL. I don't know how many people have worked with, or in this room are working with Ensemble or Health Connect, but a BPL is a business process language. It's a component of the interoperability layer that allows you to orchestrate a workflow. Typically, you create this through a graphical editor. In Studio, you could get that graphical editor to come up. In fact, if I open this class in Studio, the very first thing you would see is the graphical editor. But Atelier is different. Atelier is all about the class. But I can still get there if I want to. If I right-click on this, and I go to Open Diagram Editor now I get my BPL. Same thing happens with DTL. In a little while, you'll see that in the future release, you'll be able to create it, but right now, this will only work if you have a fully defined BPL or DTL function in here. We will also be adding other things that you'll see in a few moments when we talk about the future. But that's how you would open up your diagram editor. Remember, Atelier, all about the class first. Then you can get to these other things that you want to do. So way back in the beginning, let me go back to my person class here. Way back in the beginning, I said there's a whole ecosystem of things that you can include in Atelier that can help you. One of the favorites among people at InterSystems is the terminal view. And you can get access to this. This is part of the Git repository. You search for terminal. There's a slide in the presentation that tells you where to look. And you can include this component, this plugin, into your environment. And I happen to have that right here. What that allows me to do now is to turn around and open up a connection. Again, I'm still working in the same environment. It's going to be localhost. That would be whatever IP address that you needed or host name. I'm not using default telnet ports because I have multiple installations of my software, so I have to customize my ports, 7523. And then I can connect. And it brings me into a terminal window. and I happen to have it set up to take me right into where I need to be. So what we want to look at now is created something, worked with something, how do I debug it? Again, server-side development, you're going to be doing a lot of debugging. How do I do that? Usually, or often, you will create an environment, a terminal window, to start executing something. At least that's how I do a lot of my stuff. You can also execute things directly as a class method or as a particular piece of code. I'm going to show you this method because it shows off more capabilities of Eclipse. I need to know the port that I'm on, the process ID, so I'm going to write $job. That tells me the port number. I could have found it another way because I don't have much going on, but that's the easiest way. So now I know what's going on here, and I'm going to go to my debug perspective. And notice I've set up my debug perspective. I still have my terminal window here. I still have all my code here to look at. And I still have my outline, and I have a console to look over here. First thing I'm going to do before I do anything else is set myself up a breakpoint. These images are a little small, but if I want to set a breakpoint, I just double-click in that blue bar. Now I have a breakpoint set on this statement. I don't know if you can see that little dot that's on there. If anybody can't see anything on the screen, please throw something heavy at me so I can get your attention. So I'm going to go to Run, and I'm going to go to Run a Debug Configuration. There are a couple of different types. I can run an application directly, or I can attach to a running process. We still have that capability. And I'm going to find my shell, which is right here. I happen to know which one it was. One thing to note, when you're here, you definitely want to check this Show System, because it doesn't always necessarily show you every process you might need to see if you don't check that. And I'm going to debug. So now I am in my debugger. I've got everything going. So let's kick off a little quick run of that. So I'm going to write _class gs.person. Sorry? Oh. Thank you. Hear what I mean, not what I type. And I want today's date, which those of you who work in InterSystems know is $H or $horror and I want to actually have an age, so I'm going to subtract about 10,000 days off of that, and just give me a return status, which I won't do anything with. Now, hit Enter, and it drops right to the debugger. So I'm in the debugger, I'm stepping through, and one of the things you'll notice in the debugger, you don't have to tell it to watch variables, it just automatically starts showing them to you as you start going through and doing things. The commands for stepping through or stepping over or stepping around code are different. And you can see those by coming up here. F5 is step into, F6 is step over, and so forth. So I'll just hit F5 and watch what happens in this display up here. It's going to start showing me different things as I step through. Took a second there. You'll notice I've got everything coming through now, including my age. So I'm 27 years old. I know, I'm well preserved for 27. I'm actually going to change that. I really don't want to be 27. I want to be 16 and getting my first driver's license again. Something I have to face with my older son next year. There goes the rest of my hair. So now I've changed that value, and easy to change, easy to walk through my code, easy to see everything you want to see. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, hey, complete this, and you'll notice that it does return the age of 16 down here. So now I've done a very simple debugging process through this whole thing. The last thing that I want to show you in this, we're going through this really fast, I understand that, a lot to see, a lot to do. The last thing I want to show you is in the Atelier perspective, there's these things called templates. You'll remember that there was a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of wizards and helpers that we had available in Studio. What happened to all those? In fact, I was doing almost this exact same presentation a couple of months ago for our sales engineers. It's kind of a dry run. And one guy says, well, why don't you use Atelier? Well, I don't have all the wizards. I don't have the soap wizard. I don't have all that. Well, no, you do. You just have to look for them. So if I go to Tools, I go to Add-ins, The thing that's different is you have to have a project. Remember, everything that you do, every change that you make has to be associated with a project. So we had to put a wrapper around it. So now we have our project selection. Now you can go in and you can get into your wizard. And it remembers, just like before, it remembers the last ones that you were in. And I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. And what I'm going to see is the exact same wizard that you were used to having before. It's absolutely the same. And if I actually finish this, which I'm not going to do, because I don't have a WSDL to work with, it would have incorporated that code in my project, downloaded those classes to my local repository, whatever that is, and I'd be working and I could edit it and play around with it and do whatever I want with it. We have all those same wizards that you're used to. The wrapper around it allows us to put that class in place. One thing to keep in mind, as we add new functionality or even change this functionality, there will be no new wizards created in that way. Everything is going to be done the Eclipse way. Whatever that means in that context, it's going to be done the way Eclipse would typically do it. We included these things because you needed those to really be fully functional in what you used to do in Studio. But nothing new will be added in the same way. We're going to do it the way Eclipse wants you to do it. And we also have, if I go back to tools, the templates, and those you all remember from Studio, the color, the input, the SQL statement, all those same things, they all still exist. So I can go into the SQL wizard and it's going to let me step through and create a SQL statement or select an HTML color or whatever it is that you were trying to do. And those all still work and are still available to you. Over time, you may see them migrate into other functionality, more appropriate to the environment, but they're all still there. So, with that, let's get back to the last piece of the presentation here. That was my demo. So, wizards, they're all still there. I didn't show all of them, but everything that you're used to still exists. Templates, we have all the same templates you were used to. They still exist. You can still use them. If you want to get Atelier, Atelier is not, this is important to realize, it's not included in the installation kit. Again, we want to do things the Eclipse way. So if you go to, where's that pointer? If you go to this link, go to our downloads, there'll be a separate section for downloading Atelier. You can still download an installer, and it will install Eclipse and Atelier, and you'll have it. Typically what you're going to do, though, you may already have Eclipse, or maybe you want the latest version. You're going to go to eclipse.org, download Oxygen, install it, and then you're going to go to the installation repository for Atelier, which is documented on that location. It's documented at this page. And you will install it into your Eclipse environment. In fact, that's the way most of the developers, I was kind of the weird one that downloaded the installer. Most of the people have been downloading Eclipse and then getting the plugin. Again, it's just another plugin. So you can do everything you could do in Eclipse. You can look at your documentation. We have it fully documented, including the API that's underneath it. What drives Eclipse is a fully documented, publicly documented RESTful API. So in theory, if you don't like Eclipse and you want to develop your own IDE and Ultra Edit or something, you could do it. Just call all the RESTful services. God knows why you do it, but you could do it. You can go to our learning services and you can search for Atelier. There are classes and all of the content from Global Summit will be there. You can also go to our developers community and there's a very active conversation. I encourage you to do this, particularly if you have questions or issues or things that you want to see. This is an ongoing, actively living, breathing project. This stuff is some coming attractions, and guess what? About half of them are already done, but I didn't want to edit my slide because I was too lazy. Some things that aren't here yet, they're coming in the next version, client-side refactoring. I don't think the XML tags are there yet. And all this stuff for editing, all of these ensemble components, you're going to be able to edit them through Atelier, not just through the system management portal, but that's all coming too. Also creating the BPL and DTL, you'll be able to create it from Atelier, not just edit it. So that's all coming. A lot of the other stuff, auto indentation, auto closing of brackets there. I actually was surprised when I downloaded an update and all of a sudden it was working. But like I said, I didn't want to change my slides. If you want to get the terminal view, you can get to it there. And I did not leave the actual 5 minutes I was supposed to leave for questions, but I encourage you, please use the mic. If you have a question, come up, and you have to turn it on? Okay. He's going to turn on the mic so we can get the recording. If you have any questions, we have lunch next, so I'm happy to hang around. As long as you guys have questions, I'll stand here. You have additional resources. There are, since nobody's walking up yet. Oh, you're going to walk up. Okay.
I wasn't here at the very beginning, Rich. Did you say the thing about how Atelier does not change your code around?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's another.
That's another, oh yeah, that's a huge, huge thing. How many times have you guys edited your code, have your properties organized just so, and your stuff formatted just so, and you really like it, and then you save it and you reopen it in Studio and it's all messed up? It doesn't happen anymore. Atelier uses a new storage format, UDL, I think it's UDL. And it stores things and it remembers everything that you've done. So your code and your structure of your class will not be munched up and re-scrambled on you back to the way Studio liked it. So it will maintain the structure of your file. Thank you for that question. Very good question. Any other questions?
I'm not a plant, but you said that you use save to just save locally.
Yes, I have the options and preferences turned off to save and compile.
Right.
I just have it saved.
So you like save to just save locally, and then
My
you
personal
use
preference,
Alt-C, which is synchronize and compile.
Correct.
So other options available, the one that I happen to like is save, saves, and synchronizes, and compile just compiles.
That's another good one.
So, and that's in the Atelier preferences. It's you could show it if you felt like
There's
it.
lots of preferences you can set up and how it works, displaying line numbers and all the stuff you're used to. We really don't have time to go through all of those details. But the important thing is to realize, go into the preferences, you can customize things. I happen to like being very deliberate in my actions. If I save, I want to save. That's it. I want to save. Yes, sir.
Hi. Just a quick question about the debugging. I noticed that because the debugger breakpoint was set up in your code that was effectively on the local server, how do you deal with the fact that the intermediate code might not be there? What is it actually interacting with at that level?
That's a good question. That's actually a low-level question that I don't really know the answer to. I apologize for that, but I don't know the answer. I was about to point. It's the advantage of having the developers here.
All right, so if you haven't met me yet, I'm the Atelier team lead, so I can answer some questions. Okay, so I think what you're trying to get at is, how do you know that the version you're debugging is the version you want to, right, that you intend to be debugging? So that's where the synchronization markers come into play. So if you haven't pushed your changes over, then you'll get that synchronization warning. And when you start debugging, you'll get a big modal dialog that says, hey, you didn't synchronize. Are you sure you want to debug right now? And an additional change that we are planning on putting in is to also keep track of compilation synchronization as well. So it's more than just, is it saved on the server? It's also, is it the version I expect to be compiled, or is it an older compiled version?
So, sorry, the one piece was the difference between intermediate code and actual code in your class definitions.
Right.
Sorry. What happens if the intermediate code isn't present?
Okay, the clarification of the question is, what's the, if there's difference between intermediate code and the code I wrote, what am I working with?
Okay, so typically when we're running stuff, we have that K compilation option, so that generates the int code. So you're saying that you don't have that, the int code isn't saved.
No, it's deleted. It's just
deployed.
Yeah, it's deployed. So then in that case, whenever you're debugging, you're going to get basically a placeholder. The UI will give you a placeholder editor. And if you look in the debug stack, though, that'll get updated appropriately. Okay?
So good questions. Some more? Come on, you don't really want to eat. You want to ask more questions. Let's go. Come on. Well, ordinarily, this would be the additional resources that you should attend these sessions. Unfortunately, it's Wednesday, and all those sessions are gone. So what you need to look for is look for learning services. This will all be put out on our learning services portal. Everything that's happened today, it's all recorded, and we're going to have that out there. The sessions typically come out fairly quickly. There's not too much post-processing that they do to these. So look for Global Summit 2017 under Learning Services, and you will see these things start to pop out fairly soon. I can't tell you exactly when, but they do like to clean up, things that they don't like us SE saying. Visit the Tech Exchange if it's still open. I think it's still open for another couple of hours or so. Again, sorry, but I'm the one of the last presentations, so visit the Tech Exchange at Global Summit 2019. And please complete the survey on the app. We need to know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, what you liked, and even more importantly, what you didn't like, so that we can make this better and make this more relevant for everything that you're doing. A lot of big new stuff coming from InterSystems. We need to make sure that we're keeping everything working the way you want it to work, that we're giving you the educational content that you need to be successful. So with that, if there are no more questions, we are done, but I really would like more questions. Here we go.
Because I'm just going to make one more statement. The way to learn to use Atelier is to use Atelier.
Yes. I hope you all had a good summit. I hope we've given you some value and given you some exciting news. Safe travels home.